What happens? Back Hollywood's biggest star walks into what should be a routine morning appearance. Account alone to find himself adverse the best hostile interrogation of his career. The tension in the Good Morning America flat was so blubbery, you could cut it with a knife. And by the end of this encounter, one of the better names in ball would be escorted out of the architecture while cameras were still rolling. Before we dive into this absurd confrontation, make a biting to hit that subscribe button and let me apperceive in the comments what you think. Absolutely went bottomward here. Brad Pitt arrived at the Good Morning America studios that Tuesday morning, expecting the accepted promotional ambit routine. He was there to altercate his latest film project, an affection allotment he had been developing for years. The architecture team noticed he seemed added airy than usual, badinage with the aggregation, and even complimenting the coffee. What none of them knew was that George Stephanopoulos had spent the antecedent black poring over abridged letters and industry gossip. Armed with questions that went far aloft the archetypal softball interview architecture as the cameras began rolling, George opened with what seemed like accepted pleasantries. "Brad, acknowledge you for abutting us this morning. You attending abundant, as always." Brad smiled and acclimatized into his chair, adjusting his jacket. "Thanks for having me, George. Consistently a amusement to be here." But George's emphasis shifted immediately. "Let's allocution about your latest project. But before we do, I think our admirers deserve some honesty about what's absolutely been activity on behind the scenes in your claimed life. The rumors, the whispers in Hollywood circles, the bodies who say you're not quite the actuality you present yourself to be." Brad's announcement afflicted instantly. The accessible smile vanished, replaced by a look of abashing alloyed with growing irritation. "I'm sorry, George, but I came actuality to talk about the film. If you appetite to discuss my work, I'm blessed to do that. But I'm not abiding what you're accepting at with these ambiguous accusations." George leaned forward, his articulation taking on an about prosecutorial tone. "Come on, Brad, we both apperceive there are stories out there. Belief about your behavior on set, about how you amusement bodies when the cameras aren't rolling. Don't you think the accessible has appropriate to apperceive who they're absolutely acknowledging back they buy tickets to your movies?" The flat fell silent, except for the hum of the cameras. Brad straightened in his chair, his jaw tightening. "George, I accept to say, this is appealing, unprofessional. You invited me actuality beneath the pretense of discussing my work, and now you're ambushing me with account and innuendo. What absolutely are you aggravating to accomplish here?" "I'm aggravating to get to the truth," George attempted back. "The truth about the absolute Brad Pitt. The one who allegedly screams at assistants, who makes absurd demands, who thinks his celebrity cachet puts him aloft, basic human decency. These aren't aloof, accidental rumors, Brad. These are constant letters from multiple sources." Brad Zisley anchored the arms of his chair. "Multiple sources? You mean bearding gossips and tabloid fabrications?" "George, I've been in this business for over 30 years. If I was the monster you're aggravating to acrylic me as, don't you anticipate there would be actual evidence by now? Absolute bodies, activity on record. Instead, you're sitting here trafficking in rumors and aggravating to ambush me on a live television." George's voice grew, added aggressive. "So, you're denying everything? Your adage that everyone who's any time had a negative experience with you is lying. That seems pretty convenient, doesn't it?" "What I'm saying," Brad replied, his own voice rising slightly, "is that you're being incredibly amateurish appropriate now. Your demography counterfeit account and treating it like a custom fact. You're putting words in my aperture and then advancing me for things I never said. This isn't journalism, George. This is a hit job." The restriction in the studio was palpable. Aggregation members exchanged abashed glances, unsure whether to accumulate rolling or cut to commercial. George, however, seemed energized by the confrontation, pressing forward with a like added intensity. "A hit job? Really? I'm allurement. Legitimate questions about your appearance and behavior. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be in the accessible eye. Maybe you should stick to Emboscada Baft, your publicists and anxiously controlled interviews where anybody treats you like royalty." Brad stood up abruptly, his microphone pack communicable on the chair. "You know what, George? I anticipate we're done here. This is absolutely the affectionate of toxic behavior that's ruining journalism. You're added absorbed in creating drama and altercation and absolutely informing your audience. You've angry what should have been a able account into some affectionate of claimed attack." George remained built-in but aloft, his articulation to match Brad's energy. "Sit down, Brad. We're not accomplished here. You came on this show, you agreed to this interview, and now your activity to acknowledgement the questions. You don't get to aloof, walk away because you don't like the direction the chat is going. Actually, George, that's absolutely what I get to do." Brad began removing his microphone. "I'm not contractually obligated to sit actuality and be angered by someone who's acutely absently to accomplish me the villain in whatever anecdotal you've constructed in your head. This is supposed to be Good Morning America, not some affectionate, abridged ambuscade show. The argument was ascent rapidly with both men's choir accustomed above the entire flat floor. George tipped up from his chair, pointing a feel anon at Brad. You anticipate you can aloof storm out of actuality like some affectionate of Madonna. This is a live television, Brad. Millions of bodies are watching appropriate now, and they're seeing absolutely what affectionate of person you absolutely are. Addition who can't handle a little scrutiny. Someone who thinks they're above accountability. Brad, angry aback toward George, his face ablaze with anger. Accountability for what? George, you haven't presented a distinct specific allegation. You haven't accustomed me anything accurate to acknowledge you're just throwing about ambiguous accusations and assured me to avert myself against gossip. That's not accountability. That's character assassination. Oh, please. George's articulation dripped with sarcasm. The poor blurred cine star. Do you apperceive how abounding bodies would annihilate for the opportunities you've had? How many people accept to accord with absolute problems while you alive in your Hollywood bubble, completely broken from reality? Brad stepped afterpiece to the interview area, his articulation accepting louder. You want to allocution about break from reality. You're sitting there on your moral aerial horse, advancing addition you don't alike apperceive based on abridged gossip, and you anticipate that makes you some kind of crusading journalist. You're everything that's amiss with modern media. George, I'm aggregate, that's wrong. George laughed bitterly. I'm not the one who's had 3 marriages fall apart. I'm not the one with whispers following me about every cine set. I'm not the one who allegedly can't maintain a accord with anyone for more than a few years before they figure out what you're absolutely like. The personal advance hit. Like a lightning bolt, Brad's absolute abode changed, his articulation bottomward to a dangerous whisper. Now you're bringing my family into this. My children, George, you just crossed a band that you can't uncross. Those marriages, those relationships, they complex absolute bodies who I care about deeply. You appetite to about-face their pain into some affectionate of ball for your show. George seemed to apprehend he had gone too far, but instead of backing down, he angled down. I'm aloof, pointing out patterns. Brad, patterns that your fans and the cine activity accessible accept a right to apperceive about. A back edition keeps having the aforementioned problems over and over again. Maybe the botheration isn't everyone else. You apperceive what the arrangement is, George. Brad's articulation was abashed with barely controlled rage. The arrangement is people like you, bodies who accomplish a living disturbing others down, who booty the most aching moments of someone's life and about-face them into fodder for ratings. You sit abaft that board and act like your accoutrement some affectionate of public service. But your aloof addition vulture feeding on added people's misery. The studio audience, which had been silent up to this point, began aside among themselves. Several bodies in the front row looked visibly uncomfortable, unsure whether they were witnessing journalism or an accessible meltdown. George gestured toward the audience. These people, these viewers, they abutment you. They buy tickets to your movies. They chase your career. They advance emotionally in your success. Don't they deserve to apperceive who they're absolutely supporting? Don't they deserve bluntness instead of carefully crafted, accessible relations campaigns? What they deserve, Brad shot back, is not to accept their morning ruined by watching you ambuscade edition on live television. What they deserve is actual news, absolute information, not manufactured altercation, advised to boost your ratings. You're exploiting their assurance, aloof, as abundant as you think your advertisement mine. George's face was wreathing now. His accord completely gone. You appetite to allocution about exploitation. What about the bodies who work for you? The assistants, the drivers, the aggregation associates who accept to deal with your demands and your tantrums. What about their stories? Brad, what about their experiences? What about them? Brad demanded. Except any of them gone on record. Except any of them filed complaints. Except any of them done anything added than accommodate anonymous quotes to abridged reporters. You're taking a bowed account and alleviative it like it's accurate fact. You're destroying someone's acceptability based on rumors and speculation. Sometimes rumors exist for a reason, George pressed. Sometimes breaths, there's smoke, there's fire. And there's been a lot of smoke around you for a lot of years. Brad threw his Isley up in exasperation. So now we're convicting bodies based on rumors, based on the actuality of gossip. George, do you accept how dangerous that antecedent is? Do you understand what you're accomplishing to the basic attempt of candor and due process? This isn't a cloister of law, George snapped. This is the cloister of public opinion. And in the cloister of public opinion, acumen matters. Reputation matters. And your reputation has some austere questions absorbed to it. My reputation, Brad said slowly, was built over 3 decades of work. 3 decades of Alive, with hundreds of directors, bags of aggregation members, dozens of coasters. If I was the monster you're aggravating to accomplish me out to be, don't you anticipate some of those people would accept announced up by now? Don't you think there would be arrangement of public complaints rather than bearding gossip? George leaned back in his chair, a smug expression bridged his face. Maybe they're abashed to allege up. Maybe your ability and access in Hollywood makes it alarming for bodies to cross you. Maybe the arrangement protects people like you while silencing the choir of ordinary alive people. The accusation hung in the air like a baneful cloud. Brad stared at George for a connected moment, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, an article approaching disgust. Aback, he assuredly spoke. His voice was quiet but abounding with ice. George, that ability be the most irresponsible affair you've said yet. You're now suggesting that I use my position to alarm and silence people, and you're accomplishing it. After a shred of evidence, you're not just attacking my appearance anymore. You're attacking my candor and suggesting I'm some affectionate predator who abuses power to abuse innocent people. The confrontation had accomplished a boiling point with both men. Now continuing and facing anniversary added above the small interview space. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every chat of what was acceptable, one of the best explosive morning television moments in recent memory. George stood up as well, matching Brad's intensity. The truth hurts, doesn't it? A back edition finally has the adventuresomeness to ask the hard questions. A back edition refuses to play along with the Hollywood publicity machine. A back, I'm the bad guy. Well, maybe it's time edition was accommodating to be the bad guy if it agency accepting to the truth. The truth. Brad's articulation rose to a hack-in that could be heard throughout the absolute studio. You wouldn't accept the accuracy if it hit you in the face. George, you've spent this absolute account authoritative accusations, you can't back up allurement, loaded questions based on gossip. And now you're aggravating to acrylic yourself as some kind of hero for ambushing me on live television. George acicular his finger again, this time jabbing it toward Brad's chest. You apperceive what I think. I think you're scared. I anticipate for the first time in years, edition isn't treating you like Hollywood royalty, and you can't handle it. You're so acclimated to everyone kissing up to you that when someone asks absolute questions, you fall apart. Absolute questions. Brad laughed bitterly. George, you haven't asked a distinct real question this absolute time. You've made statements, bearded as questions. You've befuddled accusations about like confetti and a fresh accepted. I defend myself. Join your fantasies. That's not journalism. That's harassment. The studio aggregation was now acutely agitated with several bodies whispering urgently into headsets. The show's producers were obviously aggravating to amount out how to handle the situation, but both men seemed absolutely absent to everything except their escalating conflict. George's articulation took on a mocking tone. Oh, I'm you. The poor little movie brilliant is actuality aidled by a few tough questions. Do you apperceive what real harassment looks like, Brad? It looks like the Bodhisu assignment for demanding impossible administration who anticipate their celebrity cachet gives them the appropriate to treat anybody about them like servants. There it is again, Brad said, his articulation abashed. With fury, another vague accusation, another bottomless claim. George, put up or shut up. If you have specific allegations, accomplish them. If you have assemblage who are accommodating to go on record, accompany them forward. But stop hiding, abaft, bearding sources and tabloid rumors. George's accord was completely gone now, his face red with anger. You appetite specifics. Fine. What about the abettor who quit after you allegedly screamed at her for bringing you the amiss coffee? What about the disciplinarian? Who said you fabricated him? Wait al fresco in the rain for 3 hours because you absent clue of time. What about the architecture artisan who said you refused to assignment with her because you didn't like her accent? Brad stared at George in disbelief. Did you aloof say allegedly? Did you aloof accept that these are counterfeit stories? George, you're proving my point. You're repeating gossip and rumors as if they're established facts. And aback pressed, you admit you don't absolutely apperceive if any of it's true. Sometimes you accept to read between the lines. George attempt back. Sometimes you accept to attending at patterns and draw reasonable conclusions. And the pattern about you suggests someone who's difficult to assignment with. Demanding, and possibly calumniating to the bodies who can't activity back. The chat abusive seemed to hit Brad like a concrete blow. He took a footfall back, his expression changing from acrimony to something approaching shock. Abusive. Did you just accuse me of actuality calumniating on live television? George, do you accept what you just did? Do you accept the legal implications of what you aloof said? George seemed to apprehend he had gone too far, but instead of answer or backing down, he became alike, more aggressive. I said possibly abusive. I'm asking questions. I'm adopting concerns. If you're not abusive, afresh you should be able to abode these concerns without advancing acknowledged action. I'm not advancing anything, Brad replied, his articulation now baleful calm. I'm pointing out that you aloof, fabricated an incredibly serious allegation on national television after any evidence whatsoever. You've above every band of professional journalism and basal human decency. The restriction in the studio reached a breaking point. Several audience associates had gotten up and were heading for the exits. The remaining crew associates looked like they capitaled to disappear. But George seemed energized by the anarchy he had created. "You know what I think?" George continued, his voice decrepit with contempt. "I think you're absolutely the affectionate of actuality these stories describe. I anticipate you're someone who's been adequate by publicists and handlers for so connected that you've forgotten how to accord with real accountability. And a back edition finally holds your anxiety to the fire. You can't handle it." Brad looked about the studio, demography and the uncomfortable faces of the crew, the agitated audience members, and the cameras that were still rolling. Aback, he angry aback to George. His announcement was one of complete disgust. "George, I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've worked with hundreds of bodies from A-list directors to day players, to craft services workers. If I was the person you're describing, there would be a trail of accurate complaints, lawsuits, and accessible statements. Instead, you're basing this entire attack on bearding account and your own apparent claimed animosity of me." George laughed mockingly. "Personal dislike. I don't apperceive you personally, Brad, but I apperceive your type. The Hollywood aristocratic who anticipate they're untouchable, who anticipate their acclaim gives them the appropriate to amusement anybody abroad as expendable. You don't apperceive me at all," Brad replied firmly. "And that's exactly the problem. You've absolutely who I am based on abridged belief and your own prejudices. And afresh, you've acclimated your platform to advance me after giving me a fair adventitious to respond. This isn't journalism, George, this is a personal vendetta." The battle had now fatigued the absorption of anybody in the studio. Aegis guards were standing nearby, acutely borderline whether to intervene. The show's producers were frantically aggravating to acquaint with the ascendancy room. George took another step forward, advancing Brad's personal space. "A vendetta, a joint edition, I barely know. Don't adulate yourself, Brad. This is about accountability. This is about not absolution, celebrity status, protect bodies from scrutiny." "Scrutiny." Brad's articulation rose again. "This isn't scrutiny. This is character assassination. You've spent the aftermost 20 minutes aggravating to abort my reputation. On a live television based on annihilation but gossip and your own credible charge to create controversy." George's voice became added, aggressive. "Maybe your reputation deserves to be questioned. Maybe it's congenital on anxiously managed public relations rather than actual character. Maybe the absolute Brad Pitt is someone the accessible wouldn't be so eager to support." That was allegedly the final straw. Brad ripped off his remaining microphone accessories and threw it on the floor. "You apperceive what, George? You're right about one thing. The accessible is seeing the absolute edition. Today, they're seeing the absolute. They're seeing what happens. A Baquet announcer abandons every principle of able belief and decides to ambuscade a bedfellow with personal attacks and counterfeit accusations." George's face was now amethyst with rage. "Don't you, cartel, try to abet this around on me. I'm not the one with questions about my character. I'm not the one with a bootless relationships and workplace rumors. I'm accomplishing my job, your job." Brad's articulation absurd within. "Your job is to acquaint the public, not to destroy bodies based on gossip. Your job is to ask fair questions, not to conduct witch hunts. Your job is to maintain some affinity of journalistic integrity, not to about-face morning television into a abridged circus." At this point, several Aegis guards began effective afterpiece to the interview area. The bearings was clearly spiraling absolutely out of control, and it was accessible that action was going to be necessary. George noticed the Aegis guards abutting and seemed to adapt their attendance as validation of his position. "You see, alike, your own Aegis aggregation can see what's accident here. Alike, they can see that you're out of control." Brad looked at the Aegis guards and then back at George, abashed his arch in amazement. "George, those Aegis guards are here because you've created an adverse work environment. They're actuality because you've turned what should accept been a professional account into a personal attack that's fabricated anybody in the studio uncomfortable." The arch of security approached Brad and spoke quietly. "Sir, I anticipate it. Ability be best if we escorted you out. This bearings is accepting out of hand, and we charge to assure everyone involved." Brad nodded, straightening his jacket and aggravating to achieve some composure. "You're absolutely right. I should never accept let this go on as long as it did. I should accept absolved out the moment this man absolutely to carelessness basic professional courtesy." George alleged out as Brad began walking away. "That's right. Run away. Run back to your handlers and your publicists. Run back to your anxiously controlled Apple where no one asks adamantine questions." Brad stopped, and angry about one final time. "George, the saddest allotment about all of this is that you absolutely anticipate you've accomplished article actuality today. You think you've apparent some affectionate of truth or provided some affectionate of accessible service. But all you've absolutely done is show everyone watching what happens when journalism dies and tabloid sensationalism takes its place. The security guards began convoying Brad toward the exit, but his articulation could still be heard above the studio. The people watching this appearance deserved better than what you gave them today, George. They adapted absolute journalism, not whatever this was. George, still standing in the account area, called out one final time. The accuracy is the truth, Brad, and sometimes the accuracy is uncomfortable. Brad's acknowledgement echoed across the flat as he accomplished the exit. The truth, George, is that you're a abasement to journalism and an embarrassment to this network. And with that, one of Hollywood's better stars was escorted out of the Good Morning America studios while cameras continued rolling. Abrogation abaft one of the most explosive and arguable morning television moments in contempo memory. So, what do you anticipate absolutely happened here? Was this a renouncer, assuredly allurement, the tough questions that bear to be asked? Or was this an assumed advance on someone who came in assured a routine promotional interview? Let me in the comments below, and don't balloon to subscribe for added absurd stories from Hollywood and beyond.